Hey, Cookies here. We are going to go over our bigwig settings for the Nokud offensive. Going to start out with each of the bosses, and as a quick preface, the essential setup tips that I recommend is that we want to identify specific sounds for specific situations. So, for example, dangerous debuffs on ourselves, or frontals that the mobs do, things like this. We want to have specific sounds set up for each of those. So, whenever there's a dangerous debuff on ourselves, we want it to make the same sound in bigwigs across all dungeons and raids and everything like that, because then whenever we hear that sound, we know exactly what it is, even if we're in a different dungeon, which is extremely, extremely helpful because it helps us not have to think about it as much. And then, other than that, we want to try to find one important ability on every boss fight to set up a countdown timer for pretty much the same reason. It just gives us another thing where when we hear that countdown timer, we already know what is going to be happening, and we don't have to think about it as it's happening. So starting off with Granyth, the first boss, Eruption and Shards of Stone and Tectonic Stomp, these three abilities are kind of things that we don't need to worry too much about, because Eruption we shouldn't be dealing with at all in most keys because we're interrupting it with the ballistas. And then Shards of Stone just does a small or moderate amount of damage to the entire group that's unavoidable. So you could argue that you could set up like a countdown timer for that if you want to be made aware of when that damage is going to happen ahead of time. But honestly, this boss fight does not have very much damage, so that Shards of Stone isn't overlapping with anything else happening, like people taking damage, so I don't think it's going to be much of a threat. And then Tectonic Stomp is just a big circle that spawns around him, and you just have to get out of it, which we have a giant visual indicator for that. So again, we don't need to be made aware of it ahead of time or anything like that. So I think what I'm going to set a countdown timer for is just the summon saboteurs. This is the ads that spawn, and we want to make sure that we kill CC and slow them down so that they don't reach the ballistas. And then having a countdown timer for this just lets us know to be aware. So every time we hear that countdown timer, we know that we need to start looking for the next saboteur when that countdown timer finishes, rather than a noise going off as the saboteur is spawned and he's already inbound towards the ballista. So this gives us just a little bit of an edge. And I think other than that, we really don't need to set any other notifications for this fight, honestly. So I'm going to leave the rest blank. And then we will go to the Raging Tempest. So we have Surge of Power. That's just a buff that goes on us, so we don't need to worry about that. Surge of Power on the boss. Again, don't need to worry too much about this. Electrical Storm is the one that does unavoidable group-wide damage for the next 15 seconds. Sorry, my cat is being super noisy. And so I think Electrical Storm is going to be pretty important. I might say, let's see. I think I would personally do a countdown timer for Energy Surge, but that's only on characters that can purge, because if you can't purge, it's not too useful because it increases his melee attack speed. So like having a countdown timer for that so that you can purge it as soon as it goes on him would be useful. But I think instead, just so that it's universally applicable to all my healers, I'm going to have the countdown set for Electrical Storm. And what that's going to do is just let me know ahead of time, hey, there's a big event of damage that's about to happen and you need to get ready to heal it. So I just know a little bit ahead of time before we start taking all that damage. And then I think other than that, what we can do is we can set the energy surge. We can go to sound, and then we can set the sound to this voice pack that says, we can find one that says dispel, like that.
Dispel.
And even if we're not on a healer, that, oh, we can see it right here. So if you only want to see warnings for this ability, even when you cannot dispel it, disable this option. So we would just keep this enabled, and then we shouldn't hear, I believe we shouldn't hear the sound unless we can dispel it. So that'll help. Cool. Other than that, again, wouldn't said anything else different on this boss. It's pretty straightforward. And then we have Teera and Maruuk. We have Gale Arrow. This is going to be the thing that spawns all the tornadoes out of players. We want this only when on me, because sometimes it can, I believe it can target, I think it targets 3 players at a time, maybe 4. It might be everybody but the tank, but it also might just be 3 players. So we'll set only when on me just in case it's possible to not be targeted. I'm not 100% sure. And then we will set this to, for now, we're going to set it to the flag taken sound. And that just alerts us. That's the sound that I usually use whenever it's something that I need to move with or a mechanic that I need to position a certain way for. Because that way we're just more aware, hey, you need to be, you get this debuff, you need to do something with it. Then we have Repel, don't need to worry about that, or Guardian Wind. Spirit Leap, not too important. Earth Splitter. This is probably what I would set a countdown for, is Earth Splitter. So I think that is what we will do. Set a countdown for Earth Splitter. And then I think other than that, we are all good. I don't think we need to set alerts for anything else, really. The Frightful Aurora, again, we get a big visual indicator for that. Brutalize is something that we could also set a countdown timer for, but we don't want to set multiple countdown timers. So it would be something where like it's either Earth Splitter or Brutalize that I would set a countdown timer for, and I just might have a better idea of that once I actually run this key more and make that decision for myself. And then we have the last boss, Balakar Khan. Let's see, we have Iron Spear. This is where he throws a spear at a marked target, deals damage, and then charges to the spear that he threw. So this would be, again, we don't need to know if this is on a different player, so we would just set it to only when on me, and then we would set the sound for the flag taken PvP sound. Again, because it's an ability where you don't want to be near the boss when you're targeted by it, so as soon as you get targeted and you hear that noise, it's going to tell you, hey, you got to move. And then we have Iron Stampede. That's the same thing. That's part of Iron Spear. Upheaval. This is flings earth towards a player's location, knocking players back and inflicting damage. Then we have Rending Strike. That's where he does some damage to the tank. And then we have Rending Strike. That's a big tank bleed. So I think, so for this boss fight, in phase 2, there's this Conductive Strike where he does a dispellable debuff on the tank. And then if you don't dispel it in a high key, he then like one-shots them afterwards with a follow-up hit. So I think what we're going to do is, because he has 2 different tank hits, we're going to set up countdowns for both of them, because then in stage 1, it'll do countdowns for the tank bleed, so we'll know, hey, you need to heal the tank when the countdown timer is happening. And then we know in phase 2, when we hear the countdown timer, that is going to be when we're going to dispel the tank. So when the countdown timer finishes, that's when we dispel. And then additionally, we can set the sound to dispel noise. So we can go down here and set it to where the voice will say dispel.
Dispel.
All right, and then we have the intermission, which is siphon power. Don't need to worry about that. Static spear, again, same exact thing. I would set only when on me, and then I would set it to the flag taken sound, so we know to run away with that. And I believe that is all I need to set up for this boss for me personally. So now we'll check out some of the trash. We have Disruptive Shout. This is going to interrupt spell casting within 40 yards, so that is pretty important. I think what we're going to do, I don't know if I specifically have a sound yet for things like that. Stop cast. You can have it say stop cast. That's interesting.
Stop cast.
That seems helpful, but for now I'm going to leave it alone because, like I said, I don't have anything set up for this in the past. So for now, I'll just pay attention to it, and then if I find myself getting interrupted by it, I'll come back in here and adjust it and make it more noticeable. And then we have War Stomp, Rally the Clan. This is really important to interrupt. Shatter Soul. This is going to be one where we only win on me, and then we set it to the flag taken sound. Because we have to go and pick up our soul if this debuff targets us. Shadowbolt Volley, Blood Curling Shout. That's the really important interrupt. And then Deadly Thunder. Don't need to worry about that. And I think that's pretty much it for this trash. So we will leave the rest alone, and I think that is it for the Nokud offensive. So thank you so much for watching this one. Next up, we're going to talk about the 4 non-Dragonflight Mythic Plus dungeons that are going to be in the rotation, and then I'm also going to have a walkthrough of the raid. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you guys in the next one.